stardust, so shine.
Peace and blessings, family, and welcome to Labors of Love podcast. We are here to inspire, uplift, and enlighten. Each episode, we will be hearing from Black midwives, doulas, and other traditional childbirth supporters who have dedicated their lives to being of service to Black mothers and families in all aspects of the motherhood journey. This evening, I have the privilege of speaking with Ashlee Jaye Johnson, a mother of three, an author, and entrepreneur. Being petrified of needles and hospitals during her first pregnancy, she knew she'd need to find an alternative for her birth experience. She and her husband found a birth center 50 minutes from their home and took 3 months of birth classes to prepare for a breathtaking water birth. From there, she studied to become a birth and breastfeeding educator and doula, which led to the creation of Birth Class in a Box. As a result of using Ashlee's Birth Class in a Box, Black women are having breathtaking births, avoiding unnecessary pain, and enjoying the journey to motherhood. She's looking for women who want to know their options, make decisions in confidence, and prepare for birth in a fun way. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Hello.
Ashlee, I am so glad that you could join us this evening. I'm excited to jump into this conversation. I always ask, the bios don't always capture everything that we have going on, and I'm sure we'll get into a lot of it, but definitely feel free to add in where necessary. And I'm glad we also have a special guest with us.
Yes, Miss Layla.
Layla, as long as she's happy. This is absolutely a family show. You might see some ripping and running through, but we get it done, right?
Right.
So good. Well, we're going to just jump into the questions and see where the conversation takes us.
Awesome.
So prior to becoming a mother yourself and growing up, what were some of the messages that you received around pregnancy, labor, delivery, birth?
All of the stories that I heard were very traumatic, right? There were stories of like emergency C-sections, and I remember my sister right above me being pregnant and being in labor, and she kept going to the hospital and coming back, and going to the hospital and coming back. And then eventually she left and she didn't come back. And then I'm getting a call from like my mom, like she has to be rushed in for a C-section. It was a lot. And I'm like, what? Like what happened? And many of the stories that I heard was very much like that. Yeah. And it created like a sense of fear inside of me of like going through that process myself. And I used to be like, I don't want kids.
Right.
I want to be married. My older sister had 5 boys at the time. I was like, she has my 2.5 right there. We are good.
I understand. I truly understand. It's so interesting how we do have similar stories. So at what point did you begin to come into the information of the options and a different way to birth?
Yeah, so I got married September 2013. And I got pregnant on my honeymoon. Okay. And so, like my bio said, I was afraid of needles, still am. Didn't associate good things with hospitals. So I was like, we're gonna have to figure something else out. And we went to the birth center and they gave us a list of birth classes to go to. And we settled on Bradley, which is like 12 weeks of birth classes. It's a lot of classes. But it was so awesome. And all of the information that I received, it was like fascinating and mind-blowing. And, ended up having this amazing water birth. And it was very like textbook. And from there, I was like, more people need to hear this. Yes. Because I was like, no one is talking about the stories like my birth story, where it was beautiful and it was like breathtaking. And I wanted to do it again. And I wanted to talk about it. Right. And it was not traumatic at all. Yeah. And I'm like, why don't more people have stories like this?
Absolutely.
And so that's what kind of started my journey. And 6 months after I had my son, I was in classes to become a birth educator. And then a year after that, I became a breastfeeding educator.
Excellent. So what do you feel was the key component in having such an amazing birth experience for yourself?
I think one, it was having the information. Having the information was definitely key, and knowing what was available to me, and then making decisions myself versus just kind of being like put in situations like, this is your assigned doctor, this is your assigned hospital, right? And I actually started at an OB practice, and I was like, this is not going to work for me.
Right. I wonder how many visits, because I know it's like you go to a couple visits and it's like,
it was like one or two.
Yeah,
it was like one or two, and I think it was one where they had to take blood and they were like asking questions, and they wouldn't allow my husband to come into the room with me. And this was way before COVID, so that wasn't even a factor, right?
Right.
And they said it was because they wanted, in situations of like abuse or whatever, they wanted
you
the mom to be freely answer those questions. But it felt isolating, and like it made it more scary than anything. Like, I don't want to be back here by myself. I don't know what to expect.
Exactly. And that's your support. So understanding the ideal environment that you wanted to be in, when you began taking the classes, what was your intention? Like, what was your overall goal in beginning to do the education piece?
I think my goal was to learn how to cope with the pain without an epidural. I think that was really my focus at the beginning. And then it evolved into like, I want to have a magical experience. Like, I want this to be amazing. I want a water birth. And, like all these other things started to be added to it. But it definitely just started with like, I don't want to have a whole bunch of pain.
Right. And they're definitely understandable. And then you realize that it doesn't have to be that way, right? That getting the information and then knowing is empowering. So it takes away some of the anxiety. So it seems like from my experience, it was a similar thing, that once I had the information and kind of had some awareness of what my options were and some of the techniques, and I had supportive people around me, then it definitely made me relax more into this process.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think like one of the greatest shifts that I tell people in my work now is, I think it was more mental than anything, right? Like, it's obviously a physical, situation, but the way you think about the process really changes the experience that you have. So when you're thinking about contractions as pain, then you go into it like, I need to find a way out of that part, or I need to find a way to fix that part or avoid it, right? But when you know what the contractions are doing, that, it's a temporary thing for one, that, it's a gracious process of, it's not like continual pain, but it's like a contraction and then you get a break, a contraction and then you get a break. It totally changes the way you think about it and approach it. And you can be in that moment and be like, okay, this means I'm one step closer to my baby. This means my baby is about to come out, versus like, oh my God, help me, this is hurting.
Stop the pain. And I totally agree, as far as just understanding what your body's doing, right? Like the contractions, we're getting everything in place. Everything is moving. That we're moving down, we're getting in position. Like, just having that understanding, like, okay, like you said, we're almost there, right? We're almost there. And just putting that in, as opposed to, ooh, tighten up. Oh, here we go again.
Exactly.
Wow. Yeah. So you started with childbirth education classes, and then you went into breastfeeding classes?
Yep. So I did, when I was pregnant, I did the childbirth education classes, and it including some breastfeeding stuff. And then they tell you to go to La Leche League meeting. while you're pregnant. And then when I was getting like my certifications, it started as a childbirth educator. And then I did that for about a year or so. And then I started doing my training to become a La Leche League leader with the breastfeeding stuff.
Nice. Very nice. So when you began your education piece, was that for a doula program after the pregnancy?
It was childbirth education. And for Bradley, they say that you can use your childbirth education and that training that you get to be a doula as well. And so I told myself I was going to become a doula. Okay. And so I started that process of like attending births and, recruiting friends that I could do free births for and kind of like get into it. And I learned very quickly that most of the births that I would be doing would be in a hospital setting, and that was not that wouldn't fit for me. I would not be a great asset in that type of setting because it was just being there was traumatic for me. Right. And like the 2 or 3 births that I did go to, the whole time I was just angry. It was hard for me to show up for the moms because I was just angry about what was going on and what they had to like combat. Right. And so I was like, yeah, I'm just going to refer y'all to people who can handle this because I am not that person.
Oh my gosh. And I say we have so many parallels. Yes. I feel the same way. And I honestly do believe like, we have our callings and our experiences speak to that. So for me, it absolutely is like advocating for and sharing the story of how beautiful birth can be. And like you said, not necessarily coming from that lens of trauma, but from an amazing experience. And the childbirth education piece is so significant because, again, we talk about that empowerment. So regardless of what your choice is, you can take that information and you can share that information and add value to so many lives. So I definitely appreciate just really understanding what speaks to you.
Yes.
And providing that to other people. Because I totally feel the same way. I've been in situations where I'm supporting, I went with like my sister-in-law to her OB appointments and I'm in the hospital with her and he's asking these questions or not even like almost talking over her. And I'm sitting here like, wow.
Right.
Like, she just said she wants to have a natural birth and you're like, well, we'll still prepare you for an epidural. And I'm like,
right. It's so dismissive. It's so like they come at you with the savior complex. Like, I know what you need, regardless of what you say out your mouth, regardless of what you know about your own body. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. And there was one birth in particular that I went to, and from the moment we hit the door, it was just like, oh, this is not going to go well, right? Like, I could just feel it. And like, we went through the emergency room because it's the middle of the night when most babies come, right? And the woman that's at the desk is like talking to the labor and delivery room. And she's like, I think I need to hurry up and come get her because she's not even talking to me. Like, this is not her first birth. Like, this baby might just come out right here. Like, it was just horrible. And it was all because she was asking her questions, like asking her information, but she was in the middle of a contraction. So I'm like, can you give her a second? She's having a contraction. She's going to answer you. Like, just hold up. And she just like totally took it to another level. Like, they forced her onto a bed and she wanted to walk. That was so much. And I was like, guys, y'all doing too much. Like, she's not sick. She didn't break a leg and she needs y'all to fix it. She's simply here for you to catch her baby. Like,
thank you. Thank you. Yes. Yes. So again, the awareness, the education, the information to be empowered, to know your options, to be able to advocate for yourself. Like, all of those things are so valuable. So can you just speak to kind of what it is that you've created to allow for, the way in which you support mothers?
Absolutely.
And families?
Absolutely. So like I said, I was a Bradley instructor, and in order to be considered like having taken an official Bradley class, you have to go through the full 12 weeks, right? And I found those 12 weeks to be really valuable. But I realized that the women that I wanted to serve, busy Black women, right, who are usually very ambitious and like have a lot going on, one, we're not going to have time for 12 weeks of classes.
Yes.
And then two, may not see the value of taking 12 classes, you know, coming from a place of where you hear all these traumatic stories. And so you think that's what's normal. So it's like, what's the point, right? Nobody else is doing that. What's the point? And so I went to them and was like, can we create something new for these women? And they were like, no, they can benefit from this, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, okay, see y'all later then. And so I pretty much took all that I had learned through that program, as well as stuff that I learned outside of that, and just research that I was gathering along the way, and created the Birth Class in a Box. Okay. And so it's based around like making the process enjoyable. So there's 6 games in there that are learning games. They're interactive, right? Because we know we have, you know, partners who kind of feel disengaged from the process sometimes because they're not living in the pregnancy, right? And so the games are a really good way to kind of engage our partners as well. There's an info booklet in there that's like easy to read. It uses like charts and diagrams, bullet points, right? Like easy language to understand the process, to learn about the stages of labor and, you know, when to go to the hospital and all those different things, or when to leave for your birthplace. And then, you know, your options. What is an OB? What is a midwife? What are the differences? You know, what questions should I be asking them when I'm interviewing them? You know, how to give informed consent versus just consent. Mm-hmm. And then there's a pregnancy journal. So you can kind of document your whole journey. You can, there's a part in there that talks about, you know, the interview process of your providers or your doulas, those type of things. There's place for your birth plan, as well as your birth story. And then there's other little like gifts or bonuses, I call them, like Everyday Birth magazine is usually in every box, birth nurse stickers usually in every box, and then other little extras just to kind of make the process and the journey a little more special and enjoyable.
Nice, very nice. So that's the Birth Class in a Box. Now, is that something that can be taken advantage of even if you're just in the considering phase? You're not necessarily, you know, after conception. Is it something that if someone just wants to get that understanding before that aspect of the process, can they benefit from birth and birth?
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. I think that birth education, I think it should be done before you get pregnant, because there's so many things that affect that process, that affect pregnancy, birth, labor, all of those things postpartum that occur before you even get pregnant, right? So the way that you eat, you know, your stress, how you manage stress, all of those things affect that whole journey. So knowing this information beforehand can really help you, you know, go into it at an optimum level, right? As far as your mental state, your health, all of those things. So I definitely think that, you know, birth education should be a normal part of like normal education for real, right? Like when we're learning about our bodies, we should be learning about how that affects when we have babies, and not just for women, but also for men as well, right?
Absolutely. And that's why I'm grateful for platforms that are reaching a wider audience, because it's a dialogue that's necessary for all of us. It's not just specific to the birthing person, because we need the support, we need the understanding, we need, you know, all of those things. And to have those conversations or convince someone, or, you know, bring them on board after the fact, that just adds to, you know, energy taking away from really what the focus should be.
Absolutely. So absolutely. It's funny. I did my master's degree thesis about breastfeeding and the perceptions of breastfeeding in the Black community. And I interviewed people who weren't mothers, right? And I interviewed men, I interviewed like folks who would consider themselves like cousins or sisters, aunties, because when it comes to breastfeeding is in particular, right? The number 2 keys to whether a woman starts and continues breastfeeding is support and actually making the decision to do it. Like deciding I am going to breastfeed, and then having support, right? And support being those people that are around them that are saying, you should do this, or it's okay. I know it's tough, but don't forget all the benefits, or, you know, all those different things. And it's the same for birth, right? When you say that you want to have a water birth, the people around you and the messages that they're sending is going to impact your outcomes. And so, you know, having everybody being educated about these things, not just the person that's having the baby, but also the mama and the grandmama and all those things, to be like, girl, you're gonna be okay. Or, you know, come on, let me rub your back, right? Like, and not just sitting in a room watching her go through it, but actually being active participants because they understand what's going on, really could help in this whole process.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that just touches on so many things, because there's so much value in breastfeeding, and then the disconnect that, you know, over the last couple generations that we've had with breastfeeding, because that was something that was normal and supported. So how does breastfeeding play into the services that you provide, or the education that you provide currently?
So there is a section of my info booklet that talks about breastfeeding, like how to breastfeed, where to get support. There's a game that's all about breastfeeding and myths around breastfeeding. And I want to create more of these types of boxes. And I think one of them will probably be like a breastfeeding 101 type of box, to just kind of like really get into it, because there's so much misinformation about it. And like just some of the questions that come up, me having all the information that I have, it's like, I didn't realize that people had this question. But it's like this, from the smallest thing to the biggest thing. And I really want to help folks not be so afraid. And, you know, there's always that, if I can breastfeed, that's the running theme in all these conversations. If I can breastfeed, if I make enough. And it's like, you're almost, it's rare that you won't.
Right.
You are going to be fine. I promise you.
Yes. And that energy coming into it. So that's amazing. And I also feel like, you know, just the way that you are packaging it in the education piece, people learn differently, but I feel like the way that you're presenting it is something that you can take away, regardless of what your learning style, regardless of where you are in this process.
Yeah.
You can take something valuable away from just being exposed to the information. So I like the idea of the different types of boxes, whether it's birth or breastfeeding specific, and getting the spouses involved, because especially with breastfeeding, everything across the board, but to have a supportive spouse in the breastfeeding process, you know, and it's not like the question of, well, how long are you going to do it? Or, you know, any of those things coming up, that really, you know, adds to the value of the experience for mother and child. So that education piece is really valuable. Did you find any way that you had to pivot with the pandemic coming into play, and how things are processes are a little different, or did it just kind of fit into what your model was initially with the boxes? How did that
fit? It really fit. So it's funny, because I used to do educational baby showers. Right. And it wasn't even my idea. I was doing it with a nonprofit that was doing work, and we collaborated. And it was like, I thought it was just genius to use the games at baby showers to teach people about birth and baby care and all those types of things. I was like, this is such a great idea. And then that organization kind of decided that they were going to move on to other things. And they were like, you should keep doing this though. But I was like, I'm not a nonprofit. And so I have to like make money as a business. And so it morphed into the box, and later became birth class in a box, because it just made more sense. But at the time that it really started to gain traction and people started to learn more about it was really at the end of last year with the pandemic. And folks were like, this is such a great idea. And everybody was like, did you create this because of the pandemic? And I'm like, no, it came before, but it's just perfect timing.
Absolutely. Wow. Well, we love alignment, and that's definitely what that is. That is beautiful. So I like to share with the audience, like, what has there been an experience or an interaction with a mother, or your own personal experience that has been like just a real clear example of why you do the work that you do, where your passion comes from for it. Do you have any stories that you can share?
Oh, I got a lot of stories. I think the one that stands out the most is when in that period where I was like, I'm gonna be a doula. I attended a birth, and the mom had been, when they got there, they were like, we want to monitor you for 20 minutes, right? Mm-hmm. 3 hours later, she's still on this monitor. She's still in this bed, right? And the whole time she's saying, I just got to get up. My back is hurting. I just got to get up. My back is hurting. And there's a nurse in there the entire time with us because she's monitoring the strip. And I say to her, well, can she get up out the bed? And she's like, yeah, I don't care what she does as long as I can still monitor her. And I was so mad, right? Because I'm like, you heard this woman saying for 3 hours that she just wants to get up. She just got to get out the bed. And not once did you say to her, you can get up. It's fine. As long as you keep the monitor around you, you can get up. Right. And by this time, she's having all this back labor. She is in so much pain. And so it totally threw off her entire birth plan. Right. Mm-hmm. And she ended up getting an epidural, which was the one thing that she did not want. It was horrible. Yeah. And in that moment, I was like, I have to show folks what their options are. Right. I have to make sure that people are not relying on nurses and doctors to tell them what is okay and what is not. Right. And so that really like drives me to not want folks to have that type of experience where they're totally ignored and totally dismissed, right? And treated like, I don't even know, it's just so dismissive.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the one that really, really drives it in for me.
Yeah, no, and I definitely appreciate that because it's a different experience to have it on board going in, as opposed to like you're in this vulnerable space. Like I'm sure, you know, she might have thought about it, but you're having contractions. You're in labor. So the last thing you're thinking about is like, I need to argue with this woman about me,
right?
You know, getting up to walk around or
right,
or what have you. So. Wow. But just to be able to support women in this space, to be able to, you know, add to their empowerment and coming into this amazing transformative experience.
Yes.
You know, I value the work that you're doing and how it's showing up for us. You know, too often we do spend a whole lot of time on the negatives and the disparities and things of that nature. But what you spoke to a lot of are the solutions, right? Like, you know, what we can do to kind of take birth back, to go back to, you know, what we knew has worked for, you know, millennia.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that, you know, the disparities, we have to talk about those things and like, you know, all the problems and the issues. But I think when we're talking to women who are pregnant and they're vulnerable and some of them are already scared, we can't keep beating that in on them. We have to tell them something different, right? And telling them those positive birth stories and giving them something to look forward to and be excited about can really help change it for us. And it's like, you know, yes, talk when you go to, you know, Washington, D.C. and tell them all those disparities and change the laws and, you know, talk to the doctors and change the policies. But when we're talking to the moms, like, let's focus on the positive stuff and like encourage them versus scare them.
I know. Absolutely. Absolutely. The half hour goes by so quickly, but I definitely want you to please get in. How do people reach you? How do they get in touch with you? How do they get to the boxes? Please share that information.
Yes. So I'm on Instagram, Birth Class in a Box, at Birth Class in a Box, or also my name at Ashlee Jaye. My website, you can go to www.birthclassinabox.com and you'll find me there and you can get a box there as well.
Excellent. Excellent. So we will definitely have all of the information in the description so that they can click on the links and get to you. Check out the YouTube page. It's going to all be there. And I'll also include that on the Facebook page as well. If you found value in this conversation, please share. There's just so many nuggets and I just appreciate you taking the time out. I know you got the little ones and we all have so many things going on, but just to share your energy and your presence is greatly appreciated.
Thank you for inviting me. This was awesome.
Yay, good, good, good. Well, we'll definitely be continuing the conversation. Thank you for everyone who tuned in tonight. Anita Del Rio, I just wanted to shout you out because you've been on the whole time. So we appreciate you. But definitely share. We'll be back with more information. Connect with Birth Class in a Box. The information is invaluable in this experience. So thank you, everyone. And peace and blessings, family.
So, good night.